The stars had been burning with war for 63 years, and Earth had watched every single moment of it unfold across the darkness of space. Commander Sarah Chun stood at the observation deck of Luna Station 1, her eyes fixed on the distant light of a dying star system where two great powers clashed in endless battle. She had watched recordings of this war since she was a child, and now at 42 years old, she understood it better than most aliens who actually fought in it. The Galactic Concord was an alliance of 12 different species who had traveled among the stars for thousands of years, before humans even discovered fire. They called themselves the Guardians of Civilization, the Keepers of Peace, the Protectors of all sentient life in the known galaxy. But for more than 6 decades, they had failed to stop the Vreth Dominion from consuming world after world. The Vreth were insects, massive creatures with armored shells and compound eyes that saw in spectrums humans could not imagine. They moved in swarms of millions, and they conquered with a hunger that seemed endless. Every planet they took became food for their ever-growing empire, and every species they captured became slaves or worse. When the war began, Earth was nothing to either side. Humans had only just discovered how to travel faster than light, a technology they had stumbled upon almost by accident while experimenting with gravity fields near Jupiter. The Concord had sent diplomats to welcome humanity into the galactic community. But their welcome came with a clear message. You are primitives. You are children. You are not ready to sit at the table of real civilizations. The Vreth had not even bothered to send anyone at all. To them, Earth was a tiny blue rock orbiting a small yellow star at the edge of nowhere. There was nothing on that rock worth taking. Not yet. Not while bigger and richer worlds waited to be devoured. And so humanity watched the war from the sidelines, officially neutral, officially uninvolved, officially just another young species trying to find its place in a galaxy that did not care if it lived or died. But watching was never all that humanity did. Ambassador Yellen Vasquez had delivered Earth's position to the Galactic Concord with perfect diplomatic words. Earth offers sanctuary to refugees. Earth offers humanitarian aid. Earth does not offer soldiers. The alien delegates had nodded with approval, pleased that these primitive mammals knew their place. They accepted human charity and human medicine and human shelter for the millions who fled the Vreth advance. What they did not see was what happened in the shadows. General Marcus Stone had been 25 years old when the war started, a young officer in the old United States Army. Now he commanded the entire Terran Defense Force from a bunker buried 3 miles beneath the Rocky Mountains. Every day for 38 years, he had prepared for a war he hoped would never come. His soldiers trained in secret facilities on the dark side of the moon. They practiced with weapons that no alien had ever seen. They studied battle tactics from 1,000 Concord defeats and Vreth victories. They learned how the insects thought, how they moved, how they fought, and most importantly, how they died. The scientists worked even harder than the soldiers. Dr. Amara Okonkwo led a team of 3,000 researchers at a laboratory hidden in the asteroid belt. They took apart every piece of alien technology they could find, learned how it worked, and then built something better. Concord ships used energy shields that could stop plasma weapons. Dr. Okonkwo's team created missiles that phased through shields like ghosts through walls. Vreth armor could resist temperatures hot enough to melt steel. Dr. Okonkwo's team developed chemical compounds that ate through that armor like acid through paper. Every refugee who came to Earth was welcomed with open arms and gentle questions. Human doctors healed their wounds while human intelligence officers recorded their stories. Every tale of Vreth cruelty became data. Every description of Vreth tactics became a lesson. Every memory of Vreth weakness became a weapon waiting to be forged. Commander Chun turned away from the observation window and walked through the corridors of Luna Station 1. This place looked like a simple research facility to anyone who visited, a place where human scientists studied the stars and dreamed of peaceful exploration. But behind hidden doors and beneath false floors, there were weapons powerful enough to crack moons and ships fast enough to outrun light itself. She entered the command center, where Admiral James Okafor waited with a tablet in his hands. His dark skin was lined with age, and his hair had turned white from decades of stress. But his eyes were sharp, and his mind was sharper. "The latest intelligence reports," he said, handing her the tablet. "The Concorde pushed the Vreth back from 3 more systems last month. The Dominion is losing, and they are getting desperate." Chun scrolled through the data, her expression growing darker with each page. "Desperate enemies are dangerous enemies," she replied. "When an animal is cornered, it does not think about survival anymore. It thinks about taking as many hunters with it as possible." Okafor nodded slowly. "Our analysts believe the Vreth High Command is looking for an easy victory. Something to restore morale. Something to rebuild their resources. They need a target that cannot fight back." The words hung in the air between them like a poison cloud. "They will come here," Chun said quietly. "They will look at Earth and see exactly what the Concorde sees. A primitive world, a weak species, an easy meal." "Yes," Okafor agreed. "The question is not if they will come. The question is when." Chun set down the tablet and looked at the screens that covered the walls of the command center. They showed Earth in all its blue and green beauty, a planet of 8 billion souls who had never known the horror of interstellar war. Those people went to work and raised their children and lived their lives without ever knowing what waited in the darkness between stars. But some of them knew. Some of them had spent their whole lives preparing for this moment. Some of them had sacrificed everything to make sure that when the enemy finally came, humanity would not be the helpless prey that everyone expected. "Let them come," Chun said, and her voice was cold and hard as the steel of a blade. "Let them see what happens when they choose the wrong enemy." Outside the station, the stars continued to burn with distant war. But around that small yellow sun at the edge of nowhere, humanity waited in silence. They had watched for 63 years. They had learned for 63 years. They had prepared for 63 years. And now, at last, their time was almost here. High Warlord Crixthol stood in the throne chamber of the Dominion flagship, his massive insectoid body casting shadows across the metal floor as he studied the holographic maps that floated before his compound eyes. The war was failing. He could see it in every red marker that showed a lost system, every dark zone that marked a destroyed fleet, every empty space where loyal soldiers had once served the glory of the Vreth. The Concorde was winning, slowly but surely, and if something did not change soon, the Dominion would fall. His advisors stood in a circle around him, their antennae twitching with barely hidden fear. They knew that Crixthol had already executed 3 generals who had brought him bad news. They knew that his temper grew shorter with each passing day. They knew that failure meant death in the Dominion, and right now, everyone was failing. "Speak," Crixthol commanded, his voice a harsh clicking sound that echoed through the chamber. "Tell me how we save our empire." Admiral Vrexthal stepped forward, his carapace scarred from 100 battles. He was the most decorated commander in the fleet, a warrior who had crushed dozens of species beneath his claws. If anyone could find a path to victory, it was him. "Great Warlord," Vrexthal began, "our forces are stretched too thin. We fight the Concorde on 17 fronts, and we lose ground on all of them. We need time to rebuild, time to recover, time to gather new resources and train new soldiers." Crixthal's mandibles clicked with irritation. "I know what we need. What I want is a plan to get it." Vrexthal touched the control, and the holographic map shifted to show a small yellow star at the edge of known space. A single blue planet orbited that star, and around it floated a handful of satellites that the Vreth had never bothered to study. Earth, Rexthal said. The human homeworld. Crixthal leaned forward with sudden interest. The neutral ones. The species that hides while others fight. What use are they to us? They have 8 billion workers, Rexthal explained. 8 billion bodies that can serve in our factories and mines. Their planet is rich with water and metal and organic material. They have no military alliances, no defense treaties, no powerful friends who will come to save them. Another advisor spoke up, a thin Vreth named Scrix, who managed the Dominion's intelligence network. The humans have a small fleet, he said, but nothing that could challenge even a minor battle group. They have spent their time building hospitals and schools instead of weapons. They are soft, peaceful creatures who believe that kindness will protect them from the universe. Crixthal made a sound that might have been laughter. Fools. The universe does not reward kindness. It rewards strength. Exactly, great warlord, Rexthal continued. If we take Earth, we gain resources to continue the war. We gain slaves to replace our losses. And we send a message to the Concord that nowhere is safe from our reach. The neutral species who sit on the sidelines will see what happens to those who do not choose a side, and they will remember that the Vreth are still dangerous. Crixthal studied the blue planet on the holographic display. It looked so small, so fragile, so utterly defenseless. The humans had watched his people conquer 100 worlds, and they had done nothing but offer blankets and medicine to the survivors. What kind of species watched the strong devour the weak and thought that charity would keep them safe? A weak species. A stupid species. A species that deserved to be conquered. How many ships do you need? Crixthal asked. Rexthal's compound eyes glittered with anticipation. The Third Conquest Fleet. 400 warships, 2 million ground troops, enough firepower to crack their planet in half if they resist. It is more than enough to overwhelm any defense they could possibly mount. The Third Fleet is one of our largest forces, another advisor objected. If we send them to Earth, we weaken our position against the Concord. Crixthal silenced him with a sharp gesture of his claw. The humans are nothing. The Third Fleet will crush them in days, perhaps hours. They will return with resources and slaves before the Concord even knows they are gone. He turned to Rexthal with a decision made. You will lead the attack personally. Take Earth, harvest its people, and bring me everything of value. Leave nothing behind but ashes. Rexthal bowed low, his antennae pressed flat against his head in submission. It will be done, great warlord. The humans will learn the price of weakness. The Third Conquest Fleet assembled in orbit around the Dominion homeworld. 400 ships of war gathering like predators, preparing to hunt. They were the finest vessels in the Vreth Navy, armed with weapons that could melt cities and shields that could stop almost any attack. Their crews were veterans of countless conquests, soldiers who had never known defeat. Admiral Vrexthal stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Endless Hunger, and watched his fleet form into attack formation. In a few days, they would reach Earth. In a few hours after that, the humans would be slaves. It was almost too easy, almost boring, but the Dominion needed this victory, and he would deliver it. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, vanishing from Vreth space in a flash of distorted light. They crossed the vast emptiness between stars, moving toward that small yellow sun that no one had ever considered important. When they emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, Rexthal ordered the standard conquest broadcast. His communication officers sent the message on all frequencies, making sure that every human on every planet and station would hear the words that sealed their fate. People of Earth, the message declared, you are now subjects of the Vreth Dominion. Surrender immediately, and some of you will be allowed to live as servants. Resist, and your entire species will be erased from existence. You have 1 hour to respond. Rex still expected panic. He expected desperate pleas for mercy. He expected the primitive humans to beg for their lives like so many species before them. What he received instead was a single transmission from a human female, her face calm and her eyes hard as stone. Admiral Chen Wei-lin spoke 5 words that would echo through galactic history. "You should have stayed away." Rex still laughed at the message, his mandibles clicking with amusement. This human female thought she could threaten the mightiest fleet in the Dominion. She thought her brave words would somehow protect her weak little planet. She was about to learn how wrong she was. But 3 hours later, Rex still was not laughing anymore. 3 hours later, Rex still was dead. And the Vreth Dominion learned, far too late, that they had made the worst mistake in their entire history. Admiral Chen Wei-lin stood at the center of the Terran Defense Command, buried deep beneath the surface of Mars, her eyes locked on the massive holographic display that showed every Vreth ship in the solar system. 400 enemy vessels hung in space near Neptune, their weapons powered and their troops ready for the easy conquest they expected. They had given humanity 1 hour to surrender. Chun had decided to give them something very different. "All stations report ready," General Stone announced from his position beside her. "The moon batteries are online. The asteroid fleet is in position. Orbital defense platforms are armed and waiting." Chun nodded slowly, her heart beating steady despite the weight of 8 billion lives resting on her shoulders. She had trained her entire life for this moment. Every simulation, every exercise, every sleepless night had prepared her for the battle that would decide the fate of her species. "The Vreth expect us to be afraid," she said quietly. "They expect us to run or hide or beg for mercy. Let us show them what humans do when their home is threatened." She pressed a button on her command console. "All forces, this is Admiral Chun. Operation Hornet is now active. Give them hell." The moon split open. Not from destruction, but from design. Massive doors hidden in craters across the lunar surface slid apart to reveal weapons that no alien had ever seen. Each battery contained railguns, capable of launching tungsten rods at speeds that made them hit like nuclear bombs. They'd been built in secret over 40 years, piece by piece, hidden from every sensor that the Concord or the Vreth had ever pointed at Earth. The first salvo crossed the distance to the Vreth fleet in seconds, moving so fast that no shield could activate in time. 12 enemy ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light before they even knew they were under attack. Admiral Rex Thole screamed orders to his captains, demanding they return fire on the moon. But the lunar batteries were already reloading for a second strike. Then the asteroids came alive. The belt between Mars and Jupiter was full of rocks that tumbled through space, ignored by everyone who did not think they were worth studying. But humanity had been very busy in that belt. They had hollowed out the largest asteroids and turned them into hidden shipyards. For decades, they have built warships in those secret places, vessels that combined human engineering with stolen alien technology. 300 Terran warships emerged from the asteroid belt like wasps from a nest, their engines burning bright as they accelerated toward the enemy. They were smaller than Vreth vessels, faster and more agile, and they carried weapons designed specifically to destroy insectoid conquerors. Brextil finally understood that something had gone terribly wrong. "All ships, defensive formation," he commanded. "Target the human fleet and destroy them." But the human fleet did not fight like any enemy the Vreth had ever faced. They did not form neat lines and exchange fire like civilized species. They scattered like leaves in a storm, attacking from every direction at once, never staying still long enough to be targeted. Human pilots had studied Vreth tactics for 60 years. They knew that the insects relied on swarm coordination, thousands of ships moving as one under the direction of their commanders. So the first thing the humans did was blind them. Electronic warfare satellites activated across the solar system, flooding Vreth communication frequencies with noise and false signals. Suddenly, captains could not hear their admiral. Squadrons could not coordinate with each other. The great swarm became a confused mass of individual ships, each one fighting alone. Then the suicide drones arrived. Humanity had built thousands of small, unmanned vessels packed with antimatter warheads. They cost almost nothing compared to real warships, and they only needed to do one thing: get close and explode. Vreth gunners tried to shoot them down, but there were too many, moving too fast, coming from too many directions. The drones dove into carrier bays before shields could close. They slipped between escort ships and struck at the vulnerable engines of battle cruisers. They sacrificed themselves by the hundreds, and each sacrifice took Vreth lives with it. Vreth still watched his fleet dying around him and could not believe what he was seeing. These were supposed to be primitives. These were supposed to be easy prey. How could they be winning? He ordered a charge toward Earth itself, hoping that threatening the human homeworld would force the defenders to protect it. But Admiral Chun had expected this move. She had read reports of Vreth psychology. She knew they always tried to strike at civilian targets when military ones proved too hard. The orbital defense platforms around Earth activated weapons that should not have existed. Phase cannons that passed through Vreth shields like they were not even there. Gravity bombs that crushed warships into balls of twisted metal. Plasma lances that cut through armored hulls like hot knives through butter. The Vreth advance toward Earth became a slaughter. On the ground, drop pods still managed to land in several locations. Vreth soldiers poured out, expecting to find terrified civilians ready for capture. Instead, they found militia units armed with alien-killing weapons, dug into defensive positions that had been prepared decades ago. Humans, the Vreth learned, were persistence predators. They had evolved on a planet where survival meant chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They did not give up. They did not surrender. They kept fighting until they won or died. The battle lasted 72 hours. When it ended, not a single Vreth warship remained in the solar system. The Third Conquest Fleet, 400 vessels carrying 2 million soldiers, had been completely destroyed. Admiral Vrexthal died when a crewless human frigate, packed with nuclear weapons, rammed directly into his flagship bridge. Chen watched the final enemy ship explode on her display, and only then did she allow herself to breathe. Casualties? She asked quietly. 47 ships lost, Stone reported. 23,000 personnel killed in action. Civilian casualties from ground fighting estimated at 12,000. The numbers hurt. Every death was a tragedy. But they had won. Against a force that should have crushed them, they had won. Send a message to any Vreth ships that escaped, Chine ordered. Tell them what happened here. Tell them to spread the word to their dominion. Tell them that Earth is not prey, and anyone who comes here looking for an easy victory will find only death. The message went out across the stars, and the galaxy began to realize that everything they thought they knew about humanity was wrong. The news of Earth's victory spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass, burning through every species and every world until there was no one who had not heard the impossible story. The Galactic Concord held an emergency session in their great council chamber, a massive sphere floating in space where representatives of 12 species gathered to discuss matters of war and peace. But this time, they did not discuss strategy or alliances or supply lines. They discussed only one thing. How had they been so completely wrong about humanity? Ambassador Zixtal of the Melodari, a species of tall beings with silver skin and 6 arms, stood before the council with shock still visible on his face. Our intelligence services estimated that Earth had perhaps 50 combat-capable vessels, he announced. They revealed over 300 warships, plus weapons platforms and drone systems that we did not even know existed. How did they hide all of this from us? Ambassador Krell of the Stonari, a heavy creature made of living rock, rumbled with confusion. We sent survey teams to their system. We scanned their planet with our best sensors. They showed us exactly what they wanted us to see, and we believed them because we thought they were too primitive to deceive us. The council chamber erupted in arguments and accusations. Species that had dismissed humanity for decades now demanded to know why no one had paid more attention. Military commanders questioned their own intelligence. Diplomats wondered if every interaction with humans had been part of a larger plan. But while the Concord argued, humanity acted. Admiral Chun did not wait for permission or approval. She did not ask the Concord for advice or support. 3 weeks after the Battle of Seoul, the Terran fleet crossed into Vreth-controlled space and began doing something no one expected. They started freeing slaves. The Vreth had conquered hundreds of worlds over the centuries, and on each of those worlds, they had taken prisoners. Millions of beings from dozens of species worked in Vreth mines and factories, living in chains, dying in darkness, with no hope of rescue. The Concord had tried to liberate them for 60 years and failed. Humanity accomplished it in weeks. Human warships struck without warning, appearing from hyperspace with weapons already firing. They destroyed guard stations and supply depots. They overwhelmed garrison forces before reinforcements could arrive. And then they landed troops who fought through Vreth soldiers to reach the slave camps. Captain Marcus Okafor, son of Admiral James Okafor, led the liberation of a Mayan colony on a frozen moon called Vreth 7. His soldiers cut through fences and blasted open doors. And when the prisoners saw human faces instead of insect ones, many of them wept with relief. They had been told that no one would ever come for them. They had been told that they would die in chains. And now these strange beings from a planet they had never heard of were setting them free. "Who are you?" asked a Melodari prisoner, her silver skin scarred from years of hard labor. "We are humans," Captain Okafor replied. "And no one should live as a slave." News of the liberation spread even faster than news of the battle. Species that had given up hope suddenly had something to believe in. Across Concord space, people began speaking a name they had barely known before. Earth. Humanity. The ones who fight. High Warlord Crix Thal received reports of human attacks with growing rage. His compound eyes burned with hatred as he watched territory slip from his grasp. First they had destroyed his fleet, and now they were stealing his workers. These insects of flesh and bone dared to challenge the might of the Dominion. He ordered every available ship to hunt down the human raiders. He demanded that his generals crush these primitives once and for all. He screamed at his advisors that failure would mean death for everyone. But his generals faced an impossible problem. The Concord saw the Dominion's attention shift toward Earth, and they launched their largest offensive in decades. Vreth forces that should have been defending core worlds were instead chasing human ships through empty space. Systems that had held for years suddenly fell to Concord attacks. The war that had lasted 63 years began to collapse in months. Ambassador Yellen Vasquez arrived at the Galactic Concord headquarters aboard a Terran battleship, escorted by a fleet that made several council members very nervous. She walked into the great chamber with her head held high, and for the first time in history, she did not stand in the visitors' gallery, but took a seat at the main table. "Humanity requests full membership in the Galactic Concord," she announced. "We believe our recent actions have demonstrated our commitment to the values this body claims to represent." Several ambassadors protested. They argued that humanity had not gone through proper channels. They complained that humans had taken military action without authorization. They worried about what else humanity might be hiding. But Ambassador Krell of the Stonari stood up and spoke words that silenced all objections. The humans did what we could not do. They broke the Vreth advance. They freed our people from slavery. They turned a war we were slowly winning into a war we are now winning quickly. If that does not earn them a seat at this table, then what does? The vote was not unanimous, but it was overwhelming. Humanity became the 13th member of the Galactic Concord, the youngest species ever admitted, and the only one to earn their place through war instead of diplomacy. Vasquez addressed the full council after the vote, and her words were broadcast to every world in Concord space. Earth asked only to be left alone. We wanted peace. We wanted to grow and learn and find our place among the stars. The Vreth refused to let us live in peace. They came to our home with weapons and chains, expecting easy prey. They found something very different. She paused, and her eyes were hard as diamonds. Let this serve as a lesson to anyone who would threaten humanity. We do not start wars, but we finish them. We do not seek enemies, but we do not run from them either. The Vreth chose to make us their enemy, and now they will pay the price. Across the galaxy, billions watched her speech. Some cheered, some worried. All of them understood that the balance of power had changed forever. A new force had risen among the stars, and nothing would ever be the same. 11 months after the Vreth attacked Earth, High Warlord Krixthal stood in the ruins of his throne room, surrounded by the bodies of his most loyal guards, and faced the end of everything he had built. The war was over. The Dominion had fallen. Human ships and Concord fleets orbited the Vreth homeworld, their weapons pointed at the heart of an empire that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. There was nowhere left to run, nowhere left to hide, no more soldiers to sacrifice, no more worlds to lose. Krixthal had never imagined this moment. In his darkest dreams, he had never seen his empire crumble so completely, so quickly. He had ruled over billions, commanded fleets that blocked out stars, crushed species that were ancient when the Vreth were still crawling in mud. And now it was all gone, destroyed by a species he had considered too primitive to notice. Admiral Chen led the delegation that entered the throne room, walking past fallen pillars and broken statues with her hand resting on her sidearm. Behind her came representatives of the Galactic Concord, ambassadors from the species that had suffered under Vreth rule for decades. And behind them came soldiers, both human and alien, united in victory. High Warlord Krixthal, Chen announced, her voice echoing through the shattered chamber. You are charged with crimes against sentient life. The conquest and enslavement of peaceful worlds. The murder of billions of innocent beings. The attempted genocide of the human race. How do you answer these charges? Krixthal's compound eyes burned with hatred as he looked at the small human female who had destroyed his fleet. She was so tiny, so fragile, so utterly insignificant in form. And yet she had beaten him. She had beaten the greatest military power the galaxy had ever known. You are insects, he spat, his mandibles clicking with contempt. You are vermin. You are nothing. If I had taken you seriously, if I had sent all my fleets instead of just one, you would be slaves right now. Chung did not flinch. She did not react to his words at all. She simply waited until he finished and then spoke again. The charges stand. The evidence is clear. The verdict is guilty. The sentence is death. Krixthal tried to fight, tried to use his massive claws to strike down the human who dared to condemn him. But Terran soldiers were faster. They fired weapons that pierced his armored shell, and the last High Warlord of the Vreth Dominion fell to the floor of his own throne room, killed by the species he had dismissed as prey. The Dominion surrendered unconditionally that same day. What followed was the largest reorganization of galactic power in recorded history. Vreth territory was divided among the species they had conquered. Their weapons were destroyed. Their warships were dismantled. Their soldiers were sent to labor camps to rebuild the worlds they had devastated. The empire that had cast a shadow across 1,000 stars simply ceased to exist. But the galaxy did not return to the way it had been before the war. Something fundamental had changed. Something that would shape the future of every species for generations to come. Earth was no longer the quiet planet at the edge of nowhere. The Terran Coalition held a permanent seat on the Galactic Council, their vote carrying the same weight as species that had traveled among stars for millennia. Human military advisors were requested by a dozen governments who wanted to learn how a primitive world had built such devastating weapons. Terran shipyards, no longer hidden, openly produced vessels that matched or exceeded anything the Concorde had ever made. Ambassador Vasquez worked tirelessly to shape humanity's new role in galactic affairs. She pushed for laws protecting neutral worlds from invasion. She demanded accountability for species that committed war crimes. She argued that the mistakes made with Earth should never be repeated. Many agreed with her, though some worried that humanity's rise had been too fast, too dramatic, too dangerous. Admiral Chun retired from active service 2 years after the war ended. She returned to her family home in the mountains of China, where she spent her days gardening and playing with her grandchildren. Reporters came from across the galaxy to interview the woman who had saved Earth, but she rarely agreed to speak. The battle was over, she told them, and she wanted only peace. But before she left her command, she gave one final address, broadcast to every world in Concorde space and beyond. "When I was a child," she began, her voice steady and calm, "I watched the stars and wondered what was out there. I dreamed of meeting other species, learning from them, sharing our knowledge and our hope. I did not dream of war. I did not dream of blood and fire and death." She paused, and her eyes were filled with both sorrow and strength. But the universe does not care about our dreams. The universe rewards those who are prepared, those who are strong, those who refuse to surrender even when all hope seems lost. Humanity learned this lesson over centuries of struggle on our own world. We learned it again when the Vreth came to our door. We never wanted war. We never sought power. We only wished to live in peace, as one small voice in a vast chorus of intelligent life. But when the Vreth came to silence that voice, they learned what humanity has always known. We are not a species that surrenders. We are not a species that forgets. And we are not, nor will we ever be, a species that stays down. To our friends in the Concorde, we offer our hands in partnership. We will work beside you to build a galaxy where conquest is not rewarded and slavery is not tolerated. To our enemies, wherever they may be, we offer only this warning. Do not come to Earth with hostile intent. Do not threaten our people or our allies. Do not test our resolve. Because we have shown what happens when someone chooses to make humanity their enemy. We watched the stars for 63 years. We learned. We prepared. We waited. And when the enemy came, we were ready. We will always be ready. This is our promise to the galaxy, and this is our promise to ourselves. The broadcast ended, but its message echoed through the centuries that followed. Species that had never considered Earth now treated humanity with respect. Powers that might have thought about conquest reconsidered when they remembered what happened to the Vreth. And children across 1,000 worlds grew up knowing the story of the small blue planet that refused to die. Earth had stayed out of the war until the aliens chose the wrong enemy. And the galaxy would never forget the price of that mistake.